Leasing a car is the biggest waste of money out there.
I lease a car.
So why?
I think that I want to not have to deal with an older car, and I can lease it for a few years. It's cheaper. I don't drive it very much. I don't go over the limit, and I can turn it in and get a brand new car in 3 years.
Here's why you should never buy or lease a car. What you should do instead is buy a car for $5,000 in cash, drive it into the ground, and still be able to sell it for $5,000 3 years later and drive it for free.
Julie Fry says she's been looking for a way to rev up her ride.
You kind of get sick of driving the same car, every day.
So when she learned about a new car leasing program that gives her the ability to change her car every 2 weeks, she put the pedal to the metal.
If you're thinking about leasing a car anytime soon, stop and watch this first, because 2025 is about to flip the script on how leasing works. Automakers are changing the rules, banks are rewriting lease terms, and several sneaky new traps are being hidden in plain sight. Whether you've leased a dozen vehicles or you're thinking about signing your first contract, there's a wave of industry shifts coming that could cost you thousands if you're not ready. Let's break down the 10 biggest leasing changes and secrets that dealerships and finance companies hope you don't notice until it's too late. Most drivers walk into a dealership thinking they've figured out the math. I'll negotiate a lower price, lock in a good residual value, and score a sweet monthly payment. But in 2025, that whole game is being rigged differently behind the scenes, and most people won't realize it until they're deep into a contract they regret. The biggest change is how lease payments are being calculated based on what's projected depreciation curves that no longer match reality. See, the average car depreciated around 35% over 3 years a decade ago. Now, depending on the model, some cars are tanking 50% in value before the lease even ends. And that screws with the residual value, which is the foundation of your monthly cost. If the leasing company overestimates that residual value, you'll get lower payments. But when the car is returned, they lose money. So what are they doing about it? Quietly padding payments up front with White's lease buffer fees. That aren't being disclosed clearly, and that's not even the worst part. Some manufacturers like Ford and BMW are now building locked residual leases into their financing branches. That means no matter what the car is worth at lease end, they're baking in low residuals to guarantee themselves a profit margin, while your payment balloons beyond what it should be for that car's actual value. Here's a real-world example: the 2025 Toyota Grand Highlander. Toyota Financial is setting lease residuals lower than expected due to inflated supply on outgoing 2024 models. That means even if the car holds value well, your monthly payment is artificially high because they're hedging against soft resale markets. It's a quiet shift, but it's hitting lease quotes all across the board. And here's the kicker: salespeople will blame rising interest rates or credit scores. They'll talk about market factors or inflation adjustments. But the real reason is that the lease formula is changing to favor the bank's profit model over your monthly affordability. You'll pay more without even realizing why. So if you're shopping for a lease, don't just look at the monthly number. Dig deep into how they're calculating the residual value and ask if it reflects real resale trends or internal risk control by the finance company. And don't trust third-party calculators either. Many of them still rely on outdated depreciation tables. You need to run the numbers using current used car auction data if you want the truth. That's just the beginning, because EV leases are hiding a nasty surprise. No one's talking about electric vehicles have exploded in popularity, and leasing has become one of the most attractive ways to get into one, especially with those government-backed tax credits and temporary dealer incentives. But here's the problem: most drivers looking to lease an EV in 2025 have no idea what's actually waiting for them on the back end of that agreement. Let's start with the clean vehicle credit. If you lease a qualifying electric vehicle, you might hear that you get access to a $7,500 federal incentive. What they don't always tell you is, you're not getting that money directly. The leasing company gets it. They decide whether to pass any of that savings onto you, and many of them are keeping a chunk of it while advertising a discounted lease. You might think, okay, at least my monthly payments are lower because of the credit, but that's where the trap begins. Because now, leasing companies are starting to inflate the MSRP in their paperwork while applying the federal credit as a disguised rebate. The problem? Your payments are being calculated off that higher MSRP not the post-credit value. So instead of getting a genuine deal, you're getting smoke and mirrors. It gets worse because EV resale values are dropping faster than leasing companies anticipated. Used electric cars, especially Teslas and older Nissan Leafs, are getting crushed at auction. This has pushed leasing arms like Ford Credit and GM Financial to artificially lower the residual values of their EVs. Why does that matter? Because the lower the residual value, the higher your lease payment. And since EVs are depreciating rapidly due to battery degradation concerns, overproduction, and tech obsolescence, you're essentially paying a premium just to avoid owning a car that no one wants in 3 years. And then there's the hidden battery clause. Most people don't even notice it. Leasing contracts for EVs in 2025 are now starting to include as battery condition clauses, especially on Teslas, Rivians, and Hyundai EVs. What does that mean for you? If the battery state of health (SOH) drops below a certain threshold, say 80% during your lease, you may be charged for degradation unless the manufacturer explicitly warrants it. Some contracts even include vague language about expected range performance. Translation: if your battery doesn't perform like it did when new, they might hit you with an excessive wear fee even if it's normal degradation. Let's say you're leasing a 2025 Ford Mustang Mach-E. After 36 months, you notice the range has dropped by 25%. That's within typical degradation for EVs, but Ford's lease partner may assess that as a chargeable wear item unless the battery warranty specifically excludes you from liability, which is something they often don't highlight unless you ask. And what about wear and tear? One of the sneakiest issues with leasing EVs is the sensitivity of their software and over-the-air updates. Tesla, for example, has issued updates that reduce range or throttle performance based on battery conditions or external factors. Imagine finishing a 3-year lease only to find out a software update has flagged your vehicle as in need of service, triggering an inspection failure when you return the car. And guess who pays for that? Yep, you do. And let's not forget charging infrastructure, which most leasing reps gloss over. If you're leasing a car in a region without robust public charging and you rack up fees using premium chargers or even hotel resort stations, you're still paying out of pocket. And while that doesn't affect your lease terms directly, it kills the value proposition over time. What makes this all so shady is how the marketing makes it look like EV leasing is the safest, easiest way to dip your toes into electric cars. But in 2025, leasing an EV might actually be the riskiest hand move, especially if you're not ready to scrutinize every detail of that agreement. So before you sign a lease on any EV, ask the dealer these 5 questions. Who keeps the federal tax credit? What is the real residual value, and how does it compare to current used market data? Are there battery health clauses in the lease? Will I be penalized for expected battery degradation? And finally, will software changes impact lease returns or condition assessments? Because trust me, they're counting on you not asking any of that. And that leads us to another major issue. Most drivers assume the end of a lease is simple. Turn the car in, maybe pay for a little wear and tear, and walk away, right? Well, not anymore, because in 2025, leasing companies and dealerships are doubling down on a sneaky tactic that's catching even seasoned drivers off guard, and it's designed to make sure they profit whether you buy, return, or even upgrade. It's called residual padding plus buyback suppression, and it's quietly changing how lease and options are handled, especially for people who thought they might buy the car after the lease ends. Here's the setup. When you lease a car, the leasing company sets a residual value, which is the predicted value of the car at the end of your lease. That number determines your monthly payment. But in 2025, many manufacturers, particularly ones like BMW, Volvo, and Lexus, are setting those residual values artificially high to keep lease payments low and look competitive. Sounds good, right? Lower monthly payments mean a better deal, but here's the trap. If the residual value is at too high, the option to buy the car at the end of the lease becomes financially pointless. Why? Because you'll be paying more than what the car is actually worth on the used market. And since that residual is locked into your contract, there's no negotiation. Let's not forget about the Saktu dealer add-ons. When your pre-ordered vehicle finally arrives, you might find it's been outfitted with $1,500 worth of stuff you didn't ask for. Ceramic coating, VIN etching, nitrogen tires, window tinting. And even though you pre-ordered, the dealership says, this is how all cars arrive now. Good luck getting them to remove it. In many cases, these add-ons are baked into your lease cap cost as inflating your monthly payment beyond what you agreed to originally. And if you think you're protected by federal rules or leasing laws, think again. Most of these traps are completely legal. Why? Because you haven't signed the final lease agreement yet. You placed a deposit based on estimated terms, and until you sign that final contract, the dealership can change anything they want. This is how they win in 2025. They make it look like you're securing a great deal early, but in reality, you're signing up for uncertainty, lack of leverage, and higher pricing. It's a brilliant strategy if you're the dealership. So what's the play here? If you're going to pre-order a vehicle to lease, demand a binding lease quote in writing that includes a cap cost not to exceed clause. Ask for VIN-based confirmation of MSRP at least 10 days before delivery, and never assume your lease incentives will still be there when the car arrives. Make sure they're locked in or get that deposit back, because what looks like convenience up front can easily become the most expensive lease of your life. And the moment you drive off with that pre-ordered car, you've entered a lease based on their terms, not yours.